Luna Stacy Smith was fairly certain that God had a personal vendetta against her dry-clean-only wardrobe. "Come on, you piece of junk," she hissed, slamming her palm against the steering wheel of the rented Subaru. The plastic felt like ice. Her breath came out in thick, panicked plumes of white vapor. Outside, the world had ceased to exist. There was no road, no sky, and certainly no five-star midnight sun resort where her fiancé Bradley was supposedly waiting with a chilled bottle of Krug. There was only the whiteout, a wall of Alaskan snow so dense it felt like being buried alive in powdered sugar. She checked her phone. No service. Of course, she was a Smith. She was used to the world bending to her will, but the Yukon didn't care about her last name or her father's influence on the Senate Subcommittee for Aviation. She had two choices: freeze to death in a designer parka or trek toward the dim, amber flicker she'd seen through the trees moments ago. She chose the light. The trek was a nightmare of waist-deep drifts and stinging ice needles. By the time she reached the heavy timber porch of the building, her eyelashes were frozen shut. She pounded on the door, not a polite knock, but a frantic, rhythmic thud. "Open up. This is an emergency." The door didn't just open, it was yanked back with such force she stumbled forward, her numb feet catching on the threshold. She braced for impact, but instead of the floor, she hit something solid. Something warm. Something that smelled like wet cedar, wood smoke, and a scent so primal it made the hair on her arms stand up. "You're letting the cold in," a voice growled. It wasn't a metaphorical growl. It was a low-frequency vibration that started in the man's chest and rattled Luna's teeth. She looked up, squinting through the ice on her lashes. He was massive. Not gym rat massive, but carved out of a glacier massive. He wore a thermal Henley stretched tight over shoulders that looked wide enough to block out the sun. His hair was a chaotic mane of dark brown, and his eyes, they weren't quite brown, weren't quite gold. They were the color of dead leaves under a frost. I'm looking for the Midnight Sun Resort," Luna managed to stutter, her teeth chattering so hard she nearly bit her tongue. The man stared at her. His gaze flicked from her ruined suede boots to the diamond engagement ring on her finger, then back to her face with a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "You're about 50 miles off, Princess. This is Indigo Haven, and we don't do room service." "I don't care if you do interpretive dance," Luna snapped, her inner heiress finally overriding her hypothermia. "It is minus 30 degrees out there. I have money. Give me a room, a fire, and something stronger than whatever attitude you're serving." The man leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "The name's Warren, and the inn is closed for the season. The storm's knocked out the main heater, and I'm not in the mood for company, especially the kind that smells like expensive perfume and entitlement." "Listen, Warren," Luna said, stepping into his space, her eyes flashing. "I am cold, I am wet, and I am currently stranded in a town that looks like the setting of a horror movie. You are going to let me in, or I'm going to sit on your porch and die of a spite-induced heart attack, and then you'll have a ghost to deal with. Is that what you want?" Warren's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. For a second, Luna thought he might actually toss her back into the snow. Instead, he stepped aside with a curt, stiff motion. "Fine, but stay out of my way. I have work to do, and I don't have time to play tour guide to a lost tourist." The interior of the inn, the Howling Pine, was a sprawling, dusty labyrinth of dark wood and taxidermy. It felt heavy, like the walls were watching her. As Luna hovered by the massive stone fireplace, trying to coax feeling back into her fingers, she noticed something strange. The town outside was silent, but the inn was full of odd noises, soft thuds from upstairs, a low, melodic humming coming from the kitchen. "Are there other guests?" she asked, turning toward Warren. He was busy stoking the fire, his back to her. The muscles in his back moved like coiled springs. "Residents," he said shortly. "Indigo Haven is a sanctuary. People come here to be left alone. You'd do well to remember that. Don't go poking your nose into rooms that aren't yours." "Believe me, I have no interest in your sanctuary," Luna muttered, though her curiosity was already piqued. An hour later, Warren had vanished into the basement, leaving Luna with a glass of lukewarm tea and a scratchy wool blanket. The silence of the inn was oppressive. She felt a strange magnetic pull toward the back of the building, a narrow hallway lined with jars of dried herbs and old, leather-bound books. She knew she should stay put. But Stacy had never been good at following rules. She wandered down the hall, her footsteps muffled by the thick rug. At the end was a door slightly ajar, labeled Private Apothecary. A shimmering, iridescent light leaked through the crack. Just a peek, she whispered to herself. Inside, the room was filled with the scent of ozone and crushed violets. On a central stone pedestal sat a vial of liquid that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. It was beautiful, a swirling vortex of silver and gold. Luna reached out. She just wanted to see what it was. But as her fingers brushed the glass, the floorboards creaked behind her. Luna, get away from that. It was Warren. He was standing in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide with a frantic sort of hunger. He lunged for her, intending to pull her back, but his sudden movement startled her. The vial slipped. It hit the stone floor and shattered. A cloud of silver vapor erupted from the broken glass, swirling upward like a cyclone. It didn't dissipate. It lunged toward them. Luna screamed as the vapor wrapped around her wrist like a branding iron. Warren let out a choked sound, reaching through the mist to grab her, to pull her out. But the moment his skin touched hers, the vapor turned into a solid, glowing cord of light. It lashed around both their wrists, binding them together in a searing golden knot. Luna felt a jolt of electricity slam into her chest. Her heart gave a violent thud, then another. But it wasn't her rhythm. It was his. She could feel Warren's pulse thundering in her own veins. She could feel his shock, his sudden, overwhelming burst of heat, and a dark, heavy weight at the base of his spine that felt like a tail. The light flared one last time, blindingly bright, and then vanished. Silence returned to the room, heavier than before. Luna gasped for air, clutching her wrist. There was no mark on the skin, but she could still feel the phantom pressure of the cord. Warren was staring at his own hand, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at Luna, and for the first time, the annoyance in his eyes was replaced by something much more dangerous: primal fear. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice dropping an octave into a gravelly snarl. I didn't mean to. It was an accident," Luna cried, her heart racing. "What was that? What happened?" Warren took a step toward her, his presence suddenly suffocating. He grabbed her hand, forcing her to look at their wrists. "That was a matrimonial binding, you spoiled brat. It's a blood magic knot used by the Great North Packs." Luna blinked, her brain struggling to process the words. What? Like a wedding?" "Worse," Warren growled, his eyes flashing that strange predatory gold. "In the eyes of my kin and the magic of this town, we aren't just married. We're tethered, heart, soul, and instinct." He stepped closer, his chest nearly brushing hers. Luna could feel the heat radiating off him, a feverish warmth that made her head swim. "I'm a werewolf who can't shift, Luna," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "And you just tied yourself to a sinking ship. You aren't leaving Indigo Haven. Not tonight. Maybe not ever." Luna stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She was accidentally married to a grumpy, non-shifting werewolf in the middle of a literal frozen hellscape. "I'm only werewolf married, though," she whispered, more to herself than him. "Not legally married, right? It's fine. We'll just get a divorce, or a counterspell." Warren laughed, a dark, joyless sound that sent shivers down her spine. "There is no counterspell for a soul knot, Luna. And there's one more thing you should know about werewolf marriages." He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "The bond doesn't just share our hearts, it shares our needs. And my wolf? He's been hungry for a long, long time." The silence following Warren's declaration was so thick, Luna felt like she was breathing in wool. She stood paralyzed in the center of the apothecary, her wrists still tingling where the golden cord had vanished. "Hungry?" Luna finally squeaked, taking a frantic step back. The moment the distance between them hit about 5 feet, a sharp electric shock snapped behind her eyes. It felt like a needle of ice being driven into her skull. She gasped, stumbling, and instinctively lurched back toward him. The pain vanished instantly. Warren winced, rubbing his temples with his free hand. "Don't do that. The bond is fresh. It's tight. If you try to run, it'll feel like your brain is being put through a blender, and I'll feel it too." "You have to be joking," Luna said, her voice rising in pitch. "I am a person, an individual. I have a life in Manhattan that involves brunch, board meetings, and a very expensive Pilates membership. I cannot be magnetically tethered to a man who looks like he buys his clothes from a lumberjack's estate sale. Warren didn't respond with a quip. He was staring at his hands, his knuckles white. You don't understand the gravity of what you've broken. That vial wasn't just a potion, it was a catalyst. I'm the alpha of the winter's pack, or I was, until a rival's curse locked my wolf behind a wall I couldn't break. That liquid was meant to dissolve the wall. Instead, you used it to tie me to a human butterfly. A butterfly who is currently your wife? Luna snapped, though the word felt like lead on her tongue. So, if you're the alpha, fix this. Call your wolf lawyers, file for a supernatural annulment. Warren turned toward her, his eyes dark and shadowed. It doesn't work like that. The magic thinks we're a matched set now. If I go to the kitchen, you come with me. If I go to the woods, you go with me. And if I sleep... He paused, his gaze dropping to her mouth for a fraction of a second before he looked away. We share the same space. It's the only way to keep the headaches away. It was the ultimate nightmare. For a woman who valued her personal space more than her inheritance, being stuck within 20 feet of a grumpy, brooding werewolf was a special kind of hell. Where are we going? Luna demanded as they ascended the creaking staircase of the Howling Pine. To my quarters, Warren said, not looking back. The guest rooms are freezing, and as I mentioned, the heater is dead. My room has the only wood-burning stove that actually works. If we're going to be stuck together, I'm not doing it while my toes are turning black. He pushed open a heavy door at the end of the hall. The room was surprisingly sparse. A massive bed made of reclaimed timber, a wall of books, and a window that overlooked the pitch-black Alaskan forest. The air here smelled more strongly of him, that intoxicating mix of snow and musk. I am not sleeping in that bed, Luna said, pointing at the mattress. Fine, sleep on the floor, Warren replied, moving to the stove to toss in another log. But you'll be doing it 3 feet away from me. The bond won't let you get much further than the foot of the bed before the migraines start again. Luna groaned, sinking onto the edge of the mattress. It was soft, infuriatingly soft. This is a nightmare. I'm supposed to be at a resort. My fiancé is going to be worried sick. Warren paused, his hand on the stove door. Bradley? How do you know his name? You said it in your sleep, Warren lied. The truth was worse. He could feel her thoughts. Not clearly, but like a radio station tuned just slightly off frequency. He could feel the buzz of her anxiety, the flicker of her memory of a man in a tuxedo, and a strange hollow coldness whenever she thought of her fun-loving fiancé. He's a good man, Luna said, more to herself than him. He's safe. He's predictable. He sounds boring, Warren grumbled. He's stable, which is a lot more than I can say for a man who turns into a predatory mammal on the full moon. I told you, Warren said, his voice dropping into that dangerous low register. I can't turn, that's the problem. But the wolf is still there, Luna. He's just trapped. And right now he's pacing his cage because there's a stranger in his den. He stood up and began to unbutton his Henley. Luna's eyes widened. What are you doing? I'm getting comfortable. It's been a long day, and I've just been magically shackled to a headache in a parka. If you don't like it, look at the wall. As the shirt came off, Luna found it very difficult to look at the wall. Warren's back was a map of scars, thin, silvery lines that told stories of fights she couldn't imagine, but it was the raw power in his frame that held her captive. He moved with a heavy, fluid grace that was entirely unhuman. Suddenly, Warren stiffened. He turned around, his chest heaving, his eyes locking onto hers. Stop it, he rasped. Stop what? Stop thinking about it. I can feel your pulse jumping. I can feel the way your skin is heating up. The bond works both ways, Luna. If you're attracted to me, I feel it like a physical weight. Luna's face turned scarlet. I am not attracted to you. I am startled by your lack of modesty. Warren took a step toward the bed, looming over her. The air between them crackled. Luna should have been terrified, but the bond was doing something strange. It was whispering to her that she was safe, that this man, despite his snarls, was the only solid thing in a world that had gone sideways. Liars don't do well in Indigo Haven, Warren whispered. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. Get under the blankets, Luna. The fire is going to die down soon. Luna hesitated, then crawled under the heavy faux fur duvet, staying as far on the left side as possible. Warren lay down on the right, his back to her. For a long time, the only sound was the ticking clock and the wind. Then, softly, Luna spoke. Warren? Huh? What did you mean? About the wolf being hungry? In the dark, Warren's eyes opened. He could feel the soft heat of her body just inches away. The bond was humaning, a golden thread vibrating with a new, terrifying frequency. It wasn't just hunger for food. It was the ancient, territorial hunger of a mate who had finally found the missing piece of his soul. It means, Warren said, his voice a ghost of a growl, that you should pray the snow clears tomorrow. Because the longer we're tied together, the harder it's going to be for me to remember that you're a human butterfly and not mine. Luna's heart gave a violent, traitorous leap. She closed her eyes, trying to summon the face of her fiancé, but all she could see was a pair of frost-gold eyes watching her from the dark. Luna woke to a heat so intense she thought the inn was on fire. She groaned, her eyes fluttering open to see sunlight, weak, pale Alaskan sunlight, bleeding through the frost-patterned windows. But the heat wasn't coming from the sun. It was coming from the heavy, muscular arm draped over her waist and the broad, solid chest pressed against her back. She froze. The scent of cedar and musk was everywhere, wrapping around her like a physical weight. Behind her, Warren let out a low, content sound, a vibration that rumbled right through her spine. Warren? She whispered, her voice cracking. No response. He only tightened his grip, pulling her closer until there wasn't a whisper of air between them. The bond, which had been a low hum last night, was now a thundering symphony. It felt right. That was the terrifying part. Her soul was purring. Warren, wake up. She shoved his arm. He bolted upright with a speed that shouldn't be possible for a human, his eyes flashing a vivid, predatory gold before they bled back to brown. He looked at Luna, then at his arm, then at the rumpled sheets. You crossed the line, he growled, his voice thick with sleep. I crossed the line? You were using me as a body pillow. Luna scrambled to the far edge of the bed, only for that sharp ice-pick headache to strike the moment she got too far. She winced, clutching her temples. Ugh, I hate this magic. I hate this town. I want my life back. Warren rubbed his face, his movements heavy. Join the club, princess. I can feel your annoyance like a persistent itch under my skin. Get dressed. We need to go into town. Town? In this? She gestured to the window, where the snow was piled halfway up the glass. The storm broke at dawn. We need to see Silas. He's the one who brewed that peace offering you shattered. If anyone can find a way to unclip this leash, it's him. Walking through Indigo Haven in the daylight was like stepping into a storybook written by a madman. The cozy cottages had iron bars on the windows. The general store had a sign that read, "No silver allowed." And the people, if you could call them that, were off. A woman sweeping her porch watched them pass, her eyes blinking horizontally. A man chopping wood handled an axe that looked heavy enough to split a boulder, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal fur that definitely didn't stop at his wrists. Warren, a cheerful voice boomed. A man with skin the color of mahogany and eyes that shifted like liquid mercury stepped out of a shop labeled Silas's Sundries and Solutions. I heard the storm brought in a stray, the man said, grinning. His teeth were just a little too sharp. But I didn't realize you'd gone and gotten yourself branded, brother. Shut up, Silas, Warren muttered, dragging Luna into the shop. The air inside smelled of sulfur and peppermint. Silas looked at Luna, his gaze lingering on her wrist. A matrimonial binding. Bold move, Warren, especially with a high-blood human. Her father's lawyers will have a field day with the prenup. It was an accident, Luna snapped. He thinks I'm a butterfly, I think he's a rug, and we need you to break the bond. Now, Silas's smile faded. He walked around them, sniffing the air. Break it? You don't break a great north knot, darling. You might as well try to unbake a cake. The magic has already started knitting your nervous systems together. Look at him. Luna looked. Warren was standing stiffly, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. He hasn't had a scent this strong in 3 years, Silas whispered. The bond is using your vitality to feed his dormant wolf. It's a parasitic symbiosis. He needs you to stay alive, and you need him so your head doesn't explode. There has to be a way, Warren said, his voice dropping. I can't be tethered to her. She's meant to be married to some suit in the city. If his pack finds out. His pack? Luna interrupted. I thought you were the alpha. I was, Warren said, turning on her. Until I lost the ability to shift. My beta, Russell, is currently caretaking the pack. If he finds out I've bound myself to a human, a Stacy no less, he won't just challenge me, he'll eliminate the weakness. That's you, Luna. The bell above the shop door chimed. A tall, lean man with a scar running through his eyebrows stepped in. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't look at Silas. He didn't look at the shelves. He looked straight at Luna, his nostrils flaring. Warren, the man said, his voice like sliding gravel. I smelled something sweet on the wind. I didn't believe the rumors. Russell, Warren said, stepping instinctively in front of Luna, shielding her body with his. You're off your territory. Indigo Haven is everyone's territory, Russell said, his eyes fixating on the way Warren's hand was surreptitiously gripping Luna's behind his back. But that girl? She smells like yours. Or did you forget that an alpha who can't shift isn't allowed to claim a mate? Luna felt Warren's heart hammer against her back, a frantic, violent rhythm. Through the bond, a wave of pure, unadulterated possessiveness washed over her. It wasn't hers, it was his. It was dark, hot, and terrifyingly powerful. She's a guest, Warren said, his voice vibrating with a warning growl. Russell laughed, stepping closer. A guest you're touching? A guest whose pulses sync to yours? Don't lie to me, old friend. If she's your wife, she's pack. And if she's pack, she's subject to the trial. She's human, Warren roared, the sound shaking the glass jars on the shelves. Then you'd better find a way to unbind her before the full moon in 3 days, Russell said, his smile widening to reveal rows of jagged teeth. Because if she's still wearing your mark when the moon hits its peak, I'll challenge you for her. And we both know how that ends. Russell turned and vanished into the snow. Luna felt Warren's hand trembling against hers. The silence in the shop was deafening. Warren? She whispered. What is the trial? Warren didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the door, his breath hitching. It's a hunt, Luna, and in 3 days, you're the prey. The hunt? Luna's voice was barely a breath. Warren, what do you mean, the prey? They were back in the inn, the heavy front door barred against the encroaching twilight. Warren didn't look at her. He was pacing the length of the common room, his movements jagged and restless. Every time he turned, the muscles in his back rippled under his shirt like a trapped animal trying to claw its way out. It's an old law, Warren rasped, his voice dropping an octave. The pack doesn't recognize human marriage. To them, a mate is either an asset or a liability. If an alpha claims a mate who can't defend herself, any member of the pack can challenge the union. They call it the trial of the moon. If the alpha wins, the mate stays. If the challenger wins, Luna prompted, her heart hammering against her ribs. Warren stopped pacing. He turned to her, his eyes glowing a fierce, terrifying amber in the dim firelight. He takes everything, the title, the territory, and the woman. Luna felt a cold shiver race down her spine. That's barbaric. This is Alaska, not a medieval Dark Age fantasy. I'll just call my father. I'll have a private security team here by morning. Your father's security team has never seen a 300-pound wolf that can shrug off a silver bullet, Warren snapped. He walked over to her, grabbing her shoulders. His hands were hot, feverishly hot. Listen to me. Russell isn't just a rival, he's a psychopath. He's been waiting for a reason to tear my throat out since I lost my shift. You just gave him a gold-plated invitation. Luna looked up at him, and for a second, the bravado of the spoiled heiress crumbled. She saw the raw desperation in Warren's eyes. Through the bond, she felt a wave of protective fury so intense it made her vision blur. It wasn't her anger, it was his. What do we do? She whispered. We train, Warren said, and we stay close. The closer we are, the more my wolf can feed off your energy. I felt it in Silas's shop. When you got scared, the wall inside me, it cracked. I felt the wolf's claws for the first time in years. The first night of the lunar cycle began with a transformation, but not the kind Luna expected. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air inside the inn grew thick. Warren started to change. He didn't grow fur, and his bones didn't break, but his humanity seemed to peel away in layers. His skin grew flush, and he moved with a silent, lethal grace that made Luna's breath catch. I need to move, he growled. The moon is pulling at the bond. I can feel you, Luna. Every heartbeat. Every nervous thought. It's too much. I can't help it, Luna cried, following him closely as he headed toward the cellar. I'm terrified. I'm married to a man who's basically a ticking time bomb. Then help me defuse it, Warren said, spinning around. They were in the dimly lit cellar now, surrounded by barrels of ale and salted meat. Warren grabbed her waist, hoisting her up onto a heavy oak table. Luna gasped as her silk skirt bunched around her thighs. Warren, what are you? Shh, he commanded. He leaned in, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He breathed her in, a deep, shuddering inhale. Your scent, it's changing. It's getting sweeter. The bond is prepping you. It's making you a mate. I am not a mate, Luna whispered, though her hands instinctively found his hair, her fingers tangling in the thick, dark locks. I'm a Stacy. I'm meant for gala dinners and… You're meant for this, Warren growled. He bit her. It wasn't a deep wound, just a sharp, stinging nip on the sensitive skin where her neck met her shoulder. Luna let out a choked cry, her back arching. But the pain was gone in a heartbeat, replaced by a surge of white-hot lightning that shot straight down to her core. The bond didn't just hum anymore. It roared. Luna's vision flared gold. For a split second, she didn't see the cellar. She saw the woods through his eyes, the silver moonlight on the snow, the scent of like prey a mile away, the raw, cold power of the north. She felt his hunger, not for food, but for her. Warren, she gasped, her hands clutching his shoulders. He pulled back, his eyes completely gold now, the pupils slit like a predator's. He looked at the small red mark on her neck, and a look of pure, agonizing longing crossed his face. That's the claim, he whispered, his voice trembling. Russell will see that. He'll know you're mine. But it also means I have to protect you. If he touches you now, I'll burn this entire forest to the ground to get to him. Luna reached out, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. You're starting to sound like a husband, Warren. Warren caught her hand, kissing her palm with a ferocity that made her knees weak. I'm a wolf, Luna. We don't have husbands. We have lifers. And God help me, I think you've ruined me for anyone else. Outside, a long, mournful howl ripped through the night. It wasn't Warren's wolf. It was the pack. They were closer now. Warren stood tall, his presence filling the room. He looked at the door, then back at Luna. The trial starts at midnight in 2 days, he said. Until then, you don't leave my sight. You don't even breathe without me. Do you understand? Luna nodded, the weight of the situation finally settling into her bones. She wasn't just a spoiled heiress anymore. She was the heart of a wolf. I understand, she said. But Warren, if we're going to do this, you'd better make sure you win, because I haven't even had my honeymoon yet. Warren's lips quirked into a ghost of a smirk, the first real smile she'd seen. Princess, if we survive this, I'll give you a honeymoon that'll make your fun-loving fiancé look like a distant, boring memory. The bite mark on Luna's neck didn't just sting, it hummed. It was a physical anchor, a radio tower broadcasting Warren's every jagged emotion directly into her bloodstream. She could feel his protectiveness, a thick, suffocating blanket of heat, and his fear, which tasted like cold copper at the back of her throat. We need more than just my vitality, Warren, Luna said, pacing the small apothecary room. The scent of dried lavender and old blood was stronger today. If Russell is coming for us in 48 hours and you still can't shift, we're just 2 people in a basement waiting to be lunch. Warren was hunched over a heavy oak table, his large hands resting on a tattered grimoire. The candlelight threw long, flickering shadows across the scars on his back. Silas said the bond is a parasitic symbiosis. It's feeding off you to fix me. But it's too slow. The wall in my mind, it's reinforced with spite. Then we find a sledgehammer, Luna countered. She began pulling jars off the shelves, her silk sleeves fluttering. There has to be another vial, another peace offering Silas left behind. Luna wasn't a witch, but she was a woman who knew how to find a hidden asset in a hostile takeover. She began to look not at the labels, but at the shadows behind the jars. Warren, look. Behind a row of preserved wolfsbane, Luna had found a false backing to the shelf. She pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't Silas's handwriting. The script was elegant, feminine, and ancient. Warren took the book, his fingers trembling slightly as he brushed the cover. This belonged to my mother, the matriarch before the curse took the pack. He opened it to a dog-eared page. His eyes scanned the text, his jaw tightening until Luna thought his teeth might crack. What is it? she whispered, stepping into his space. The 20-foot rule was unnecessary now. She wanted to be close. The bond demanded it. It's the ritual for the matrimonial binding, Warren rasped. It says the bond isn't just a tether. It's a bridge. In times of crisis, the human mate can lend their will to the wolf. It's called the breath of the soul. Luna looked at the diagram. 2 figures, their hearts connected by a spiraling line of light. How do we do it? It requires total vulnerability, Luna, Warren said, turning to face her. His eyes were dark, the gold swirling like a storm. No secrets. No shields. You have to let me all the way in. Not just into your head, but into the parts of you that you hide from everyone. The parts that make you Luna Stacy, instead of just a name on a trust fund. Luna swallowed hard. She thought of her life in the city. The curated smiles, the hollow engagement to Bradley, the constant pressure to be perfect and untouchable. Letting Warren in meant letting him see how terrified and lonely she actually was. "And what do I get in return?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You get the wolf," Warren whispered. He stepped closer, his heat radiating off him in waves. "You get the strength of the north, and you get me, all of me." They sat on the floor, knees touching, in the center of a circle of candles. The sleet hammered harder outside, but inside the apothecary the air was still and heavy with the scent of ozone. "Close your eyes," Warren commanded. Luna obeyed. She felt his hands take hers. His palms were rough, calloused, and impossibly warm. "Find the thread," he whispered. "The golden cord. Don't fight it. Follow it back to me." Luna reached into the darkness of her own mind. She found the spark of the bond. It felt like a live wire. She grabbed hold of it and pulled. Suddenly she wasn't in the room anymore. She was in a forest of shadows. It was freezing, and a massive iron gate stood before her, wrapped in heavy rusted chains. Behind the gate she heard it, a low, mournful howl that broke her heart. The trapped wolf. "Warren," she called out. "I'm here," his voice echoed in her mind, sounding older and more powerful than she'd ever heard it. "The gate is the curse. I can't break it from the inside. I don't have the key." "Then I'll be the battering ram," Luna said. She threw her entire will, all her stubbornness, her hidden fire, her untapped rage at a world that had always told her to be quiet and pretty, against the chains. She imagined the golden cord between them turning into a searing white flame. In the apothecary, Warren's back arched. His fingernails dug into the floorboards, leaving deep gouges in the wood. His skin began to shimmer, the hair on his arms thickening, his jaw elongating. "Luna," he gasped, his voice a mix of a human shout and a beast's snarl. The power was too much. The bridge was overflowing. Luna felt her own strength draining away, her head falling back as she gave him everything she had. Just as the darkness began to take her, she felt a pair of massive furred arms catch her. A wet, cold nose pressed against her cheek. "I've got you," the voice said. No longer Warren's human voice, but a psychic resonance that vibrated in her marrow. "I've got you, my mate." Luna opened her eyes to see a shadow looming over her. It wasn't the man. Not entirely. Warren stood on 2 legs, but he was huge. 7 feet of silver-gray fur, muscle and teeth. His eyes were pure, molten gold, glowing in the dark. He looked down at her, a low rumble of a growl vibrating in his chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. He had shifted. "Warren?" she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. The wolf leaned down, his massive head nudging her palm. He licked her hand, his tongue rough like sandpaper, before his form began to shimmer and shrink, back into the man she knew. Warren sat on the floor, naked and heaving for breath, his skin slick with sweat. He looked at Luna, and for the first time, the grumpy innkeeper was gone. In his place was a king who had just reclaimed his throne. "It's back," he rasped, a feral grin spreading across his face. "The wolf is back." But his smile faded as he looked at the window. The moon was visible through the clouds, a silver sliver that was growing larger by the hour. "Russell is coming tomorrow night," Warren said, his voice cold as the tundra. "He thinks he's hunting a broken alpha and a helpless human. He has no idea he's walking into a slaughterhouse." Luna leaned against him, her strength slowly returning. She felt the mark on her neck throb in time with his heart. "Good," she said, her voice hard, "because I'm not losing my husband before the first dance." The morning of the final day broke in a bruised shade of purple. The air in Indigo Haven didn't just feel cold, It felt electric, charged with the static of 20,000 eyes watching from the tree line. Luna sat at the scarred wooden table in the kitchen, a mug of black coffee between her hands. She wasn't shaking anymore. The breath of the soul ritual had left a permanent bridge in her mind. She could feel Warren outside in the yard, his presence a heavy, dark gold sun on the horizon of her consciousness. He was training. Not with weights, but with the raw physics of his new body. Luna watched through the frosted window as he moved, a blur of gray and shadow. One moment he was human, throwing a hatchet with bone-deep precision. The next, his form would flicker, his shoulders broadening, his hands curving into claws as he shredded a practice log into kindling. The shift was fluid now, fueled by the bond. Every time he tapped into the wolf, Luna felt a surge of heat in her own chest. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. It was theirs. "You're staring," a voice rasped. Luna jumped. Silas was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a look of grim amusement. He wasn't wearing his shopkeeper's apron. He was draped in heavy furs, and a necklace of blackened teeth hung around his neck. "He's different," Luna said, turning back to the window. "He's an alpha who's finally tasted blood again," Silas said, walking over to pour himself a cup of coffee. "But don't get comfortable, Luna. Russell isn't coming alone. He spent the last 3 years whispering in the ears of the younger wolves. He's convinced half the pack that Warren is a relic, a human lover who's gone soft." "Warren isn't soft," Luna said, her voice turning sharp. Silas chuckled, his mercury eyes swirling. "I know that, but the trial isn't just a duel, it's a hunt. Russell will use the woods, he'll use the shadows, and he'll use you." Warren stepped into the kitchen, steam rising off his bare skin despite the sub-zero temperatures. He looked at Luna, and for a heartbeat his eyes remained gold, pure, predatory gold, before fading back to brown. "They're gathering at the frozen falls," Warren said, his voice a low vibration. "Midnight, that's when the moon hits the zenith." He walked over to Luna, ignoring Silas entirely. He reached out, his thumb grazing the mark on her neck. The touch sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through her. "I'm going to put you in the cellar," Warren whispered. "Silas will stay with the door. It's reinforced with silver salt. They can't get in." "No," Luna said, standing up. Warren's jaw tightened. "Luna, this isn't a debate. Russell wants to lure me away from you so he can pick us off one by one, if you're in the cellar." "If I'm in the cellar, I'm a bird in a cage," Luna interrupted, her voice steady. "And we both know the bond. If you're out there fighting for your life, and I'm miles away behind a silver door, your strength will be halved. You need the bridge, Warren. You need me." Warren looked at Silas, then back at Luna. He grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against him. His heart was a war drum against her chest. "If you come out there," he growled into her hair, "I can't guarantee you won't see things you'll regret. I can't guarantee you'll ever be able to go back to your normal life after watching what a wolf does to defend his mate." Luna pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. She reached out and felt the raw, jagged power of his soul through the bond. She didn't see a monster. She saw a partner. "Warren," she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "I'm a Stacy. We don't hide in cellars when there's a hostile takeover in progress. We sit at the head of the table." The sun vanished, leaving the world in a shroud of silver and black. Warren began the final preparation. He didn't use armor, he used ritual. He painted Luna's wrists with a mixture of ash and crushed herbs from his mother's journal, his fingers lingering on her skin. "This will keep the cold out," he murmured, "and it will tell the pack that you aren't a guest anymore. You're the alpha's mate. To touch you is to declare war on the North itself." "I'm ready," Luna said. She was wearing her ruined designer parka, but underneath she felt like she was wearing iron. The bond was a roaring fire in her veins. As they stepped off the porch and into the frozen night, the shadows of the trees seemed to shift. Low growls vibrated from the darkness. Dozens of pairs of glowing eyes ignited in the brush, following their every move as they began the long trek toward the frozen falls. "Stay within 5 feet," Warren commanded, his hand gripping her so tightly she could feel his pulse. "If the headache starts, tell me immediately. That means Russell is trying to jam the frequency." "I hear them," Luna whispered, her eyes darting to the woods. "I hear them breathing." "Good," Warren growled, his form beginning to grow, his steps becoming heavier, more deliberate. Let them breathe. It's the last thing they'll do before the moon peaks. The frozen falls was a cathedral of ice, illuminated by a moon so bright it turned the snow into a sheet of polished silver. High above, the water had flash-frozen into jagged, blue-tinted daggers. At the base of the falls stood the pack. Luna felt them before she saw them. The bond in her chest was vibrating so hard it felt like a physical hum, a warning siren screaming in her blood. There were 30, maybe 40 of them, shadows with glowing amber eyes circling the clearing in a slow, predatory orbit. "Stay behind me." Warren's voice was no longer human. It was a distorted rasp, his chest broad enough to shield her entirely. "Russell," voice echoing sharp and mocking. "You're late, Warren. I thought maybe the alpha had decided to stay inside and knit sweaters with his pet human." Russell stepped into the center of the clearing. He was already mid-shift, his spine elongated, his hands ending in black, hooked claws. He looked less like a wolf and more like a nightmare. Beside him, 3 younger wolves snarled, their hackles raised. "The moon is at its peak, Russell," Warren growled, stepping forward. "The trial is set. You want the mantle? Come and take it." "Oh, I want more than the mantle," Russell hissed, his eyes flicking to Luna. "I want to see the look on your face when I break the bond. I want to feel the moment your soul snaps because she's gone." It happened in a heartbeat. Russell lunged, a blur of gray-black fur. Warren didn't flinch. He met the charge head-on, his form exploding into the massive silver-gray wolf Luna had seen in the apothecary. The sound was primal, a cacophony of snarls, snapping jaws, and the wet tear of flesh. Luna gasped, her hands flying to her chest. The bond wasn't just a thread anymore, it was a live wire. Every time Russell's claws found Warren's shoulder, Luna felt a sharp, searing pain in her own arm. Every time Warren slammed Russell into the ice, she felt a surge of cold triumph that made her vision blur. "Luna! Watch out!" Silas's voice barked from the tree line. 2 of Russell's sycophants had broken rank. They weren't looking at the alphas, they were looking at the weak link. They circled her, their bellies low to the ground, saliva dripping from their jowls. Luna backed away, her heels catching on a frozen root. She was alone. Warren was pinned under Russell, blood staining the silver snow. The Luna whispered, desperate, "Warren, I can't. They're coming." Through the bond she felt a spike of pure, unadulterated agony from Warren. Not from his wounds, but from the terror of losing her. "Lend me your will," his voice roared in her mind. "The bridge, Luna. Give me everything." Luna didn't close her eyes this time. She stared the lead wolf in its yellow eyes and reached deep into that golden knot in her soul. She didn't just give him her strength, she gave him her fury. She gave him every moment she'd been told she was just a spoiled heiress. Every moment she'd been treated like a prize to be won. "Take it!" she screamed. A shockwave of golden light erupted from her, visible even to the human eye. It traveled across the ice like a lightning strike, hitting Warren. Warren's silver fur seemed to ignite. He let out a roar that cracked the very ice of the frozen waterfall above them. With a surge of impossible strength, he threw Russell off him, sending the dark wolf crashing into a stone pillar. Before the 2 circling wolves could reach Luna, Warren was there. He didn't just move, he teleported in a blur of silver light. He stood over her, his muzzle dripping with blood, his golden eyes burning with a divine light. He looked at the rest of the pack, who had frozen in terror. "Does anyone else?" Warren's psychic voice boomed through the clearing, shaking the trees. "Want to touch what is mine?" Russell wasn't done. He was broken, his ribs shattered, but his spite was a bottomless well. He looked up at the jagged daggers of ice hanging from the falls directly above Luna. "If I can't have the pack," Russell wheezed, his human voice bleeding back in, "then you won't have her." He lunged not at Warren, but at the base of the waterfall, slamming his remaining strength into the structural ice. "Warren!" the Luna screamed. The world turned into a slow-motion nightmare. The blue ice groaned, detached, and began to fall. Tons of frozen death aimed directly at the spot where Luna stood. Warren didn't shift back. He didn't run. He threw his massive body over hers, shielding her with every inch of his silver-gray frame. Luna's world was black. Not the black of a room with the lights off, but the heavy, suffocating black of being buried alive. She couldn't move her arms. Her legs were pinned by a weight that felt like the earth itself had decided to sit on her. But she wasn't cold. In fact, she was burning. Above her, wrapped around her like a living shield, was Warren. Through the bond, the silence was screaming. It was a jagged, frantic pulse. Luna, Luna, Luna. It wasn't a word, it was a heartbeat. Warren, she tried to croak. Her mouth was full of grit and the copper taste of his blood. A low, pained whine vibrated through the fur pressed against her face. He was alive, but the weight of the frozen falls, tons of jagged blue ice, was resting entirely on his spine. She could hear his ribs creaking, a sickening, slow-motion sound of snapping wood. Warren spoke with a psychic voice, flickering and weak. Don't move, Luna. The ice, it's unstable. If I shift back, it collapses. You'll be crushed. You can't stay like this, Luna cried in her mind, her panic rising like a tide. You're breaking, Warren. I can feel it. The bond was a roadmap of agony. She felt the sharp daggers of ice piercing his flanks, the crushing pressure on his lungs, the sheer agonizing will it took for him to keep his limbs locked in an arch over her body. Silas muffled, echoing, Luna, can you hear me? Russell wheezed, laughing triumphantly in the distance. They're dead, Silas. No one survives the falls. The trial is over. I am Alpha by default. Above the surface, the pack stood paralyzed. Russell, bleeding and broken, was dragging himself toward the Alpha's stone, his eyes wild with a Pyrrhic victory. But beneath the ice, a different kind of magic was brewing. Warren, Luna whispered, her tears hot against his fur. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to give you everything. No, Warren growled in her head. The first time almost killed you. Your human heart. It can't take the strain of a second surge. If you push again, you'll stop beating. Then we stop together. Luna snapped. I didn't come all the way to Alaska to be a widow before the snow melts. Take it. You stubborn wolf. Take it all. Luna didn't just push her will this time, she opened the floodgates. She reached into the center of the golden knot and tore it wide open. The gold light didn't just travel to Warren, it consumed them both. In the darkness of their icy tomb, they became a sun. Warren's wolf didn't just grow, it evolved. His fur turned from silver gray to a blinding, ethereal white. His muscles expanded with a force that defied physics. The clearing at the frozen falls erupted. The pack scrambled back as a pillar of white light and snow blasted upward. From the center of the crater, a beast emerged that the North hadn't seen in 1,000 years. A great white alpha, 10 feet tall at the shoulder, eyes like twin stars. And on his back, her hands buried deep in his white mane, stood Luna Stacy. Her dress was torn, her face was smeared with ash and blood, and her eyes were glowing with the same celestial gold as his. She looked like a Valkyrie carved from the frost. Russell fell to his knees, his eyes wide, his jaw hanging slack. The ancient, it's impossible, that bloodline died out. The great white wolf stepped toward him, the ground trembling with every pace. He didn't growl, he didn't need to. The sheer pressure of his presence forced Russell's head into the dirt. Warren's voice echoed through the minds of everyone present, cold and final. You tried to kill my mate. You tried to bury the heart of the North. The wolf leaned down, his massive jaws inches from Russell's throat. The trial is over, the voice boomed, and the sentence is exile. If I see your shadow on my land again, I won't bury you. I'll feed you to the crows piece by piece. Russell didn't argue. He turned and fled into the dark, a broken cur with no pack and no name. The great white wolf turned back to the clearing. One by one, the other wolves bowed their heads, their tails tucked. Silas stepped forward, his eyes wet with tears, and dropped to one knee. Long live the Alpha, Silas whispered. Warren looked up at Luna. He began to shrink, the white light fading as he returned to his human form. He caught her as she tumbled off his back, both of them collapsing into the snow, exhausted and shattered, but alive. Luna looked at him. At the man, Warren, and saw the bond shimmering between them, stronger than the ice, deeper than the earth. We did it, she whispered, her voice fading. We did, Warren rasped, pulling her into his chest. He looked at the pack, then at the dawn beginning to break over the mountains. But the world is going to come looking for you, Luna. Your father. Your fiancé. The life you left behind. Luna looked at the engagement ring on her finger, the cold, sterile diamond of her old life. She pulled it off and tossed it into the deep, dark snow of the crater. Let them look, she said. They won't find a spoiled heiress, they'll only find the Winter Queen. The thaw had finally come to Indigo Haven. Luna sat on the wide porch of the Howling Pine, wrapped in a thick wool blanket that smelled of cedar and warren. In her hand was a cup of Silas's special brew, mostly peppermint and a touch of something that made her skin tingle with a low-voltage magic. The bruises from the frozen falls were fading into yellowish smudges, but the mark on her neck? That was permanent. It had settled into a faint, silvery whorl, like a thumbprint of moonlight. The spoiled heiress who had stumbled into town a week ago was gone. In her place was a woman with a steadier gaze and a heartbeat beat in a perfect syncopated rhythm with the man currently splitting wood in the yard. Warren wasn't using his wolf strength to chop the wood. He was doing it the human way, slow, methodical, and grounding. He stopped, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a gloved hand, and looked up at the porch. His eyes were no longer the frantic, shadowed pits of a trapped animal. They were clear, a warm honey gold that seemed to catch every ray of the spring sun. "The satellite phone is ringing again," Warren called out, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "Your father's assistant is on his third nervous breakdown of the hour." Luna didn't move. "Let him vibrate. I told him I'm staying through the spring to oversee my investments." Warren climbed the porch steps, his boots thumping solidly on the timber. He sat on the railing across from her, his presence instantly pulling at the bond. It felt like a warm hand resting on her shoulder. "And Bradley?" Warren asked, his voice losing its teasing edge. "I sent the ring back with Silas's last supply run to Anchorage," Luna said. She reached out, taking Warren's hand. His skin was hot, a constant furnace that she'd grown to crave. "He'll find someone who likes Mai Tais and safety. I think I've developed a taste for something a bit more feral. The pack is healing, Luna, because of you. They've never seen a bond like ours. They're calling you the soul anchor. They think you're a miracle." "I'm just a woman who didn't want her husband to be turned into a rug," Luna teased, though her eyes were soft. Warren pulled her toward him, tucking her head under his chin. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "I spent 3 years in a cage of my own making. I thought I was a monster who'd lost his teeth. I didn't think there was anything left in the North worth saving." He tilted her face up, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Then you crashed your car in my front yard," he whispered, "and you reminded me that a wolf is nothing without something to protect. You didn't just break the curse, Luna. You gave the Alpha a reason to lead." "So," Luna whispered, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. "What happens now? No more trials? No more being buried under mountains of ice?" Warren leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a slow, deliberate heat that made the bond hum a satisfied, purring note. "Now," Warren growled playfully, "we run the inn. We lead the pack. And we figure out exactly what a little nodding between enemies looks like when the enemies are finally home." Indigo Haven was no longer a place where monsters went to hide. It was a place where they went to be found. Luna Stacy had come to the north looking for a resort and a fiancé. She found a king, a kingdom, and a soul that finally matched her own. The snow had cleared, the whiteout was over, and for the first time in her life, Luna wasn't looking for the exit. She was exactly where she was meant to be, bound, marked, and loved by the wolf.